The forklift that moved itself. It happened at an Amazon fulfillment center in Joliet, Illinois, in November 2021. I was working the night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., in the packing zone near Dock 7. The building was enormous, with the constant echo of rolling pallets and the distant hum of conveyor belts. That night, the usual noise seemed quieter, as if something was waiting. I'd been there for 2 years, and nothing ever really scared me before. But I remember the air felt heavier that night, colder, as though the warehouse itself was holding its breath. Around 2 a.m., I stepped outside the break room to start my next round of loading. The motion sensor lights flickered on in waves down the aisle, and I noticed one of the forklifts sitting halfway down the row. The key was out, company policy, but the red taillight blinked once, like a heartbeat. I thought maybe someone had just parked it. I walked past it with my handheld scanner, but before I got more than 20 feet away, I heard the unmistakable squeal of rubber tires on polished concrete. The forklift was moving. Slow, deliberate, like someone easing forward with a full load. I froze. The seat was empty. The steering wheel turned slightly left, correcting itself, as if following an invisible hand. It rolled forward another few feet, stopped, and then reversed a little, bumping against a stack of empty pallets. I felt my skin tighten all over. Forklifts can't move without the ignition key. I knew that better than anyone. "Who's in zone 4? I said into my radio. Silence. I tried again. "Anyone using vehicle 12? Still nothing but static. Then, faintly, I heard something, breathing. Not through the speaker. Behind me. I turned, and the aisle was empty. Just rows of yellow racks stacked 20 feet high and the dim buzz of fluorescent lights. I turned back toward the forklift. It was now angled toward me, the headlights flicking on for a split second, blindingly bright, before going dark again. My handheld scanner beeped in my pocket, even though I hadn't scanned anything. The screen showed a message I'd never seen before: T. Hall, active. That name meant something. Tom Hall. He used to work my shift, years ago. I'd never met him, but people mention him now and then. "Don't joke about Hall," they'd say when something went missing. He'd died in a warehouse accident, crushed by a malfunctioning forklift back in 2016. I remember the veterans telling me it was in Dock 7. The exact dock where I was standing. I backed up slowly, eyes locked on the forklift. It wasn't moving anymore. I decided to walk toward the control office to check the security feed. Every sound, the creak of metal racks, the far-off whine of conveyor belts, seemed to follow me. When I reached the office, the guard on duty, Manuel, was staring at the monitor. His face was pale, his hand trembling as he adjusted the camera feed. "Zone 4 camera just turned on by itself," he said. "Look." On the screen, we saw the forklift move again. No driver. It rolled down the aisle, stopped right in front of the camera, and turned slightly as if facing us. The lights flickered on, and for a split second, less than half a second, there was a man sitting in the seat. Blue vest, Amazon badge clipped to his chest. The face was blurred, but you could make out the name on the tag. T. Hall. Then the image glitched. The forklift froze mid-frame. The monitor went black. When it came back, the forklift was gone. The aisle was empty. We both went to check the area. I didn't want to, but Manuel insisted. We walked the length of Zone 4, our flashlights sweeping across the cold floor. Nothing. No forklift, no tire marks, no sign anyone had been there. Then I saw something glint near a pallet jack, a small plastic card half covered in dust. I bent down and picked it up. An old Amazon employee badge, cracked and faded. The photo was barely visible, but the name wasn't. Thomas Hall, Fulfillment Associate, ID number 052894. Manuel looked at me, his mouth half open. "That's impossible," he whispered. "They collected all badges when he died." He reached for the radio, but before he could speak, the loud hum of a forklift engine echoed down the aisle behind us. We spun around. The lights overhead began flickering like strobes. The sound got louder, closer, until it felt like it was circling us, but there was nothing there. Then, just as suddenly, silence. The air turned ice cold. My breath came out in white clouds. I heard the faint beeping of a reversing forklift, beep, 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 and when I turned, I saw the machine rolling slowly backward into the shadows at the end of the row. I ran after it, shouting for it to stop, but it disappeared behind a line of pallets that hadn't been there moments before. When we checked again 10 minutes later, the forklift was parked exactly where I'd first seen it. Engine cold. Key still out. Everything looked normal, except for one thing: the seatbelt was buckled tight, as if someone invisible was still sitting there. The supervisors brushed it off as a system glitch, claiming one of the backup batteries might have caused the movement. But the security team quietly removed that section of footage from the archives. The following week, Zone 4 was closed for maintenance. Nobody ever talked about it again, at least not on record. I switched departments a month later. I didn't want to work near Dock 7 anymore. The forklift stayed parked there for weeks, covered in dust. Eventually, it disappeared, no transfer notice, no report. Management said it was retired. That would have been the end of it. But on the morning of December 14th, after finishing a late shift, I walked out to the parking lot. The sun was just starting to rise, lighting the endless line of employee cars. Mine was parked near the edge, facing the delivery trucks. I reached for my keys, and froze. There, in the empty space right beside my car, sat a forklift. Same model. Same number painted on the side, 12. The seat belt was buckled. The dashboard light blinked red once, just like that night, one heartbeat. The tag on the steering wheel read: Operator, T. Hall, active. The end. The box that wasn't on the list. It happened in October 2022 at the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I worked the overnight packaging shift, 8 p.m. to 4:30 a.m., in Zone D, where we handled returned items and damaged goods. That night was cold and unusually quiet. Usually, you could hear the constant rhythm of tape guns, conveyor belts, and scanners chirping. But around 2 a.m., it felt like the whole building had gone still. Even the hum of the lights seemed distant, as if something was absorbing the sound. I'd been working alone that night because my usual partner, Jess, had called in sick. The air smelled faintly of wet cardboard and machine oil. I scanned through the stack of boxes in front of me. Each one had a printed label, a barcode, and an ID number that matched the manifest on my tablet. Everything was routine until I reached a box sitting slightly apart from the rest, near the end of the conveyor. It was small, about the size of a shoebox, wrapped neatly in brown Amazon tape, but there was no barcode. No shipping label. Nothing. Completely blank. I frowned, lifted my scanner, and aimed it at the side anyway, just to see if maybe the code was faint. The scanner beeped twice, then flashed red. The screen read, "Item not in system." That was strange. Every box in the building was traceable. I tried again, this time typing the item's physical bin number manually. The same message appeared. I called over the shift supervisor, Alex, but when I turned, he wasn't there. The entire aisle was empty. Normally you'd see at least a few workers moving around with pallet jacks or rolling cages. That night, there was no one. The conveyor suddenly stopped for maintenance reasons, leaving only the low hum of ventilation fans. The box sat there on the belt, like it was waiting. I could feel a strange pressure in my chest, the kind you get before a thunderstorm. Against my better judgment, I decided to open it. Maybe it was a mislabeled return, I told myself. I pulled out my utility knife and carefully sliced through the tape. The cardboard flaps opened with a soft sigh, releasing a faint, stale smell, like dust and something metallic. Inside were several laminated ID badges. My breath caught when I saw the Amazon logo on them. Each had a name, a photo, and a department, all former employees I vaguely recognized from old rosters. There was something off about them though, the dates of employment were all listed as ended. Except for the last one. At the bottom of the stack was a badge with my own name on it. The photo was current, same as the one on my active badge clipped to my vest. But the end date printed below was October 15th, 2022, tomorrow. I froze. The air in the warehouse felt heavier, colder. My hands trembled as I picked up the badge. It wasn't a fake, it had the same texture, the same coating, even the little chip embedded in the back. I held it up under the overhead light, and it glinted exactly like a real one. I looked around again, but I was still alone. The belt hadn't restarted. The other boxes sat motionless, sealed and silent. Then I heard a faint sound. Not from the speakers, not from the intercom, directly from my headset. It was a whisper, static at first, then words. Return to sender. The phrase repeated, softer each time. Return to sender. I yanked the headset off and dropped it. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I grabbed the box, intending to take it to the supervisor's office, but when I looked inside again, the badges were gone. The box was empty. Just plain brown cardboard, nothing else. I stood there in disbelief, turning it over, checking every corner, nothing. Not even dust. I put it aside and grabbed my tablet to log an incident report. When I pulled up the manifest again, a new entry had appeared at the bottom of the list. Shipment ID, RTSD0928. Item name, employee clearance. Assigned to A. Parker. That was me. I didn't add it. No one could have. The system was offline for my zone since the conveyors were stopped. I stared at the screen until it timed out. The box still sat next to me, closed again somehow, the tape resealed neatly as if I had never opened it. My hands started shaking so badly I had to set the tablet down. I decided to walk it to the control room. The main hallway lights flickered as I moved, one section at a time, as if something was following me. When I reached the control office, I found Alex finally there, talking to one of the floor techs. I set the box down on the counter and tried to explain what had happened. Alex frowned, scanned the label, still blank, and shrugged. There's nothing in the system for that, he said. You sure you didn't mislabel something? I told him everything. About the badges. About my name. He gave me this look, half concern, half annoyance, and said, You're probably overworked, Parker. Go home early, get some rest. We'll deal with it in the morning. He put the box on a rolling cart behind the desk. I left my station, still shaking. The parking lot was nearly empty when I got to my car. The cold air felt good against my face, like I had finally escaped the suffocating pressure of the building. I drove home, trying to convince myself it was some kind of prank, maybe an old test box from training. But when I got home and took off my vest, something fell out of the pocket. It was the same laminated badge I'd seen inside the box, the one with my name and tomorrow's date on it. The next morning, I came back to work early, determined to prove I wasn't losing my mind. But when I got to the gate, my access card didn't work. The guard scanned it, frowned, and told me to wait. A few minutes later, Alex came out from the office with a clipboard. He looked uncomfortable. Parker, HR's made some changes, he said quietly. Your position was marked inactive overnight. Some kind of system error, I guess. You can't clock in right now until it's fixed. He handed me an envelope. Inside was my final paycheck stub, printed and signed. The termination date read October 15th, 2022. The same one from the badge. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at the paper. Behind him, through the open warehouse door, I could see that same brown box sitting on the conveyor belt in Zone D. Someone had written on the top in black marker, returned. That night, around the same time, 2 a.m., my phone buzzed on my nightstand. Unknown number. The caller ID said Amazon Fulfillment. I didn't answer. But the voicemail that came through was just one thing, the sound of a scanner beeping, followed by a flat, automated voice. Item returned. Employee clearance complete. The end. Voices over the intercom. It happened at the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in March 2023. I was working as a night shift security technician, responsible for monitoring the warehouse cameras and internal communication systems. The place was massive, more than 1 million square feet of identical aisles and metal racks stacked with thousands of boxes. At night, it felt endless. The hum of conveyor belts never stopped, and the fluorescent lights gave everything a pale, washed-out glow that made time blur. That night, I was covering for another technician who'd gone home early. It was around 1:40 a.m. when I first noticed something strange. The intercom light for Zone 5, upper mezzanine, flickered on for a second. No one ever used that line anymore. Zone 5 had been closed off after a partial ceiling collapse 2 years earlier. It was being used only for storage now, sealed behind a locked gate. I leaned toward the console, expecting a system glitch. The green light flashed again, steady this time. Then came a sound, soft static, like wind moving through a tunnel. I reached for my headset and pressed the channel button. At first, nothing. Then, through the static, a voice. Weak, uneven. Help me. Zone 5. The words were slow, dragging, like someone trying to breathe and talk at the same time. I froze. The voice wasn't one I recognized. It sounded older, maybe a man in his 40s. I turned to the night guard sitting across from me. You hear that? I asked. He nodded slowly. Who's in Zone 5? No one, I said. That area's locked down. I checked the system log. There were no active badges registered in that zone for the past 18 months. The last one belonged to a maintenance worker named Kevin Walsh, the same man who'd been injured during the ceiling collapse. He never came back to work after that. I tried speaking into the mic. Zone 5, this is Control. Identify yourself. For a few seconds, only static. Then the voice again, closer this time, trembling. It's cold here. I can't get out. The guard stood up, uneasy. That's not funny, he said. I switched to the camera feed for Zone 5. Most of the lights were off except for one near the center of the mezzanine. The image was grainy, full of interference lines. At the edge of the frame, I saw movement, something small, like a shadow shifting just beyond the light's reach. Then the camera froze for half a second before resuming. The shadow was gone. We decided to check it out. Against protocol, I grabbed my flashlight and radio, and we walked down the silent corridor toward Zone 5. The building always felt colder at night, but the air near that area was freezing. When we reached the locked gate, I used my override keycard. The red light turned green, and the gate clicked open with a metallic echo that rang through the empty mezzanine. Inside, everything smelled like dust and old metal. The ceiling above was covered in plastic sheeting from the old repairs, fluttering softly with the air currents. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, landing on pallets, half-empty shelves, and an overturned rolling cart. Then the intercom speaker above our heads crackled to life. Zone 5, need help. The same voice. It came from right above us. I looked up. The small speaker was corroded, covered in dust. There was no way it could even still function. The guard beside me whispered, Jesus, it's coming from here. I radioed back to the control room, but the line was dead. Just static. We kept walking, the sound of our boots echoing off the concrete floor. The voice returned, louder this time, desperate. Don't leave me here. I turned in a slow circle, trying to locate the direction. The sound wasn't coming from any one place, it was everywhere. Through the walls, the ceiling, the floor. My flashlight flickered, then went out completely. In the brief darkness, I heard something shuffle behind us. When I turned the light back on, the guard was staring at the far end of the mezzanine. There was a shape standing there. Human-sized. Barely visible in the dim light, a person wearing an old yellow safety vest, head slightly tilted. Hey! I called out. Identify yourself. No answer. The figure stood still. Then, slowly, it stepped sideways, disappearing behind a stack of pallets. I ran toward it, ignoring the guard's warning. The space between the racks was narrow, lined with boxes that hadn't been touched in years. My flashlight beam passed over dust-covered labels and a broken ladder, but no one was there. Then I noticed something on the floor. A badge. I picked it up and wiped off the grime. The name on it read Kevin Walsh, Maintenance, ID 03947. The photo was faded, but it was definitely him. The man who'd been trapped during the collapse. My radio came alive suddenly with harsh static and then the same voice, now sounding directly inside my ear. "Please, tell them I'm still here." The sound was so clear it made my heart skip. I dropped the radio. When it hit the floor, the static cut off instantly. The warehouse went silent again. We decided to leave. As we turned to go, the intercom above us gave one final burst of static, and then, clear as day, my own name came through. "Eric, don't go." The guard and I both froze. The voice was exactly mine, tone, cadence, everything. I didn't say anything. I just looked up at the speaker and felt something inside me go cold. We backed out slowly and shut the gate behind us. The moment the lock engaged, the light in Zone 5 flicked off on its own. Back in the control room, the intercom log still showed the same thing, incoming transmission, Zone 5 to 1:42 a.m. But the system data beneath it listed the source as inactive user ID, 03947. That was Kevin Walsh's number. When we reviewed the camera feed later, the part where I saw the figure was gone. Instead, the footage jumped straight from an empty aisle to a close-up of the badge lying on the floor. I reported it all to the site manager the next morning. They dismissed it as interference, possibly leftover wiring from the damaged section. But that night, when I started my next shift, something new appeared on the intercom console. Right below the Zone 5, upper mezzanine light was a new label printed by the automated system. User active, K. Walsh. And every time I walked past the closed gate after that, the speaker above it clicked softly, like someone inside was still trying to call out. The end. The locker that never opens. It happened at the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Fort Worth, Texas, in July 2022. I had started there only 3 weeks earlier, working the graveyard shift in outbound packaging. The warehouse never truly slept, forklifts humming, belts rattling, scanners chirping, but after midnight, the noise felt thinner, as if there were long pauses between each sound. That's when you started noticing small things, the echo of your own footsteps, a door creaking somewhere far away, the hum of fluorescent lights above your head. Every employee had a locker near the back hallway by the time clock. Mine was number 412. Right next to it, slightly separated from the others, was an old dented locker with a nameplate that read T. Miller. The paint was chipped, and a thick layer of dust covered the vents. Someone had tried to pry it open years ago, the latch was bent, and the padlock had rusted to a dull brown. Everyone avoided it. When I asked about it during my first week, the supervisor just said, "Don't mess with Miller's locker." Nobody would say more. One night, during my 1 a.m. break, I sat alone at the bench near the lockers. The air conditioning had shut off again, and the only sound was the clinking of cooling pipes overhead. My phone battery had died, so I sat there staring at the rows of metal doors reflecting the cold fluorescent light. That's when I heard a faint tapping. 3 quick knocks. From inside one of the lockers. I turned around slowly. The sound came again, this time clearly from the dented one marked T. Miller. My stomach tightened. I got up, thinking maybe it was some kind of echo from the pipes, but when I stepped closer, I could hear something else, a faint vibration, like a phone buzzing inside metal. I crouched down. The locker door rattled softly, then went still. I reached out and touched it. The metal was freezing cold, far colder than the others. "Hello?" I said quietly, half expecting someone to laugh from behind the corner. Nothing. The next morning, I asked one of the older workers, Denise, if she remembered anyone named Miller. She looked at me strangely, then shook her head. That locker's been here since before I started. They tried to clear it once. It opened by itself during a power cut. Manager said never again. That night, I couldn't stop glancing at it every time I passed by. During my second break, around 2:30 a.m., I decided to take a closer look. I wanted to prove to myself that it was just old pipes, not something supernatural. I used my flashlight and checked the lock. It was covered in rust, impossible to open. But as I stood there, the light from my phone dimmed and flickered. Then the locker door gave a faint metallic groan. It shifted. The latch moved on its own, scraping slightly as if something inside was pressing against it. My breath caught in my throat. I took a step back. The padlock fell to the floor, snapping open without any force. The door creaked open an inch, then two, releasing a cold draft that smelled like dust and machine oil. I should have run. Instead, I reached out and pulled it open. Inside hung an old blue Amazon jacket with reflective stripes, the kind from years ago. Beneath it, on the shelf, was a folded orange safety vest and a company ID badge lying face down. I picked it up and turned it over. T. Miller, Fulfillment Associate, ID 02753. The photo was faded, but you could still make out his face, a man in his late 30s, smiling slightly. The plastic of the badge was ice cold. I put it back where I found it, trying to laugh off the chill crawling up my neck. Then my flashlight blinked again, and a low tone came from inside the locker. A phone had turned on. I looked down and saw a small black rectangle under the jacket, a company-issued phone, the kind we use to scan packages. The screen was cracked, but still glowing. A notification slid across the display. One new message: don't stay. I stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight. It hit the floor and went out. In the darkness, I heard the faint buzz of the phone again, followed by a soft voice coming from the locker's open space. Close it. My knees went weak. I grabbed the flashlight, turned it on, and the locker was empty. The jacket was gone. The phone was gone. Only the cold air remained. I slammed the door shut and locked it with the rusted padlock lying on the floor. The moment it clicked, the hum of the warehouse returned, machines whirring, belts rattling, people's voices echoing faintly in the distance. The next morning, I asked the maintenance manager if anyone had been scheduled to work near the lockers overnight. He said no, and that the power in that hallway had been cut from midnight to 3 a.m. for electrical testing. No lights, no functioning intercom, no active circuits. Later that week, I noticed a small tag taped above the locker: "Do not remove, historical property." I didn't remember it being there before. 2 nights later, when I arrived for my shift, the locker was gone. In its place was a fresh coat of gray paint and a blank wall. The floor tiles beneath it were new. I asked Denise where it went. She looked confused. "Which locker?" she said. The others didn't remember it either. Like it had never existed. That night, as I clocked out around 4:30 a.m., I checked my phone. There was one unread message in my work inbox. The sender name was just T. Miller. The subject line read, "You opened it." And the message body was blank except for one timestamp, 2:33 a.m., the exact minute the locker had opened. The end. The security footage loop. It happened at the Amazon distribution center in Reno, Nevada, in February 2023. I worked in the security control room, monitoring over 100 cameras spread across the entire warehouse. It was the night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., a quiet, endless cycle of screens, static, and routine. I'd done it for years. You get used to the hum of machines, the flicker of fluorescent lights, the faint echo of forklifts in the distance. But that night, something in the feed changed. It was around 2:17 a.m. when camera 27, covering Sector C, aisle 14, started glitching. I tapped the monitor, thinking it was just interference. The image froze for a few seconds, then resumed, but what I saw didn't make sense. The same sequence kept repeating every 5 minutes. A worker pushed a cart past the camera, dropped a box, bent to pick it up, and then looked straight into the lens. The footage would cut, rewind, and start again, exactly the same movements, the same angle, the same timestamp, 2 hours 17 minutes and 3 seconds. I checked the live feed list. According to the system, camera 27 was streaming in real time. But the timestamp refused to move. It was stuck. I radioed the floor supervisor, Mark, asking if anyone was working in Sector C. He said no, the section had been cleared for overnight cleaning and was locked. No one's supposed to be there, he said. You sure you're looking at the right feed? I told him yes. The person on screen wore an older style blue vest with the company's 2018 logo, something no one used anymore. I zoomed in on the face, but it pixelated too much to identify. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't anyone I recognized. I switched to the next camera in the sequence, camera 28, which covered the opposite end of the aisle. The feed there was live, showing empty racks and a single flickering light. But at exactly 2:22 a.m., the same man appeared again, walking out of frame from the previous camera's direction, doing the same movements, drop, bend, look up, just like before. I replayed it 3 times. Every version was identical, down to the second. When I scrubbed backward through the archive, I noticed something worse. The loop had been running for days. Every night between 2:17 and 2:22, the same footage repeated. No one had reported it because the system automatically overwrote older data after 72 hours. I pulled the backup logs. The employee badge ID visible on the vest read #A3617, C. Larson. The name made my chest tighten. Chris Larson had been one of the floor staff years ago. He died on site in 2019 after being crushed under a collapsed shelving unit in Sector C, Aisle 14. I checked the incident reports to confirm the date. It matched. The air in the control room felt heavier. I turned the fan on, even though the room was already cold. Mark came by to look at the footage himself. He leaned in close to the screen, squinting. That can't be Larson, he said. He's, you know. But then, as if reacting to our conversation, the man on the screen paused mid-step, turned his head, and stared directly into the camera. His face came into focus for just one frame. It was Chris. The same eyes, the same faint scar under his lip. The screen flickered. Static. When the feed returned, the aisle was empty again. Mark swore and stepped back. Cut the camera, he said. It's looping old data. Probably some archive error. I tried switching it off, but the system froze. A message appeared across the screen, data source in use. I checked the diagnostics, camera 27 wasn't connected to the current network. The serial number was listed as inactive since 2020. That shouldn't have been possible. We called maintenance to check the hardware connection. When they arrived, the tech climbed up to the control panel near the ceiling. After a few minutes, he climbed down, pale and confused. There's no camera there, he said. The mount's empty. Cable's cut clean. Looks like it's been gone for years. We all stared at the monitor. The feed was still running. Camera 27, aisle 14. The same figure walking, dropping the box, bending, staring. Looping. At 2:31 a.m., the man on the screen suddenly stopped mid-motion. This time, he didn't continue the cycle. He looked up, straight at us, lips moving. The camera mic wasn't active, but we could see the faint shape of his mouth forming words. Mark leaned closer. What's he saying? I whispered it before I realized, we never left. The lights in the control room flickered. Every monitor glitched at once, showing overlapping frames of different aisles, each filled with faint human shapes. For a second, it looked like dozens of people moving through empty zones, pushing invisible carts, lifting boxes that weren't there. Then, just as suddenly, everything went black. The backup generator kicked in 10 seconds later. All systems rebooted. Every feed came back online except one, camera 27. It was gone from the list. The icon was grayed out, marked device not found. We tried to pull the footage from storage, but the last file wouldn't open. It was corrupted. I made a copy anyway and saved it to an external drive before IT wiped the server. The next night, I came in early to check if the feed was still gone. It was. But while scrolling through the new camera list, I noticed something strange. A new camera had been automatically added at the bottom of the grid. Camera 127, Sector C, Aisle 14. The feed showed the same view, but empty. The timestamp read current time. Relief washed over me for a second, until I saw something small move at the edge of the frame. A man pushing a cart. Dropping a box. Then, as he turned toward the camera, the screen froze at the exact same second as before, 2 hours 17 minutes and 3 seconds. The end. The pallet that returned. It happened at the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Columbus, Ohio, in December 2022. I was part of the defective returns department, the place where all the damaged, unwanted, and misdelivered products went before being scrapped. It was a quiet, cold section at the far end of the warehouse, away from the main packing lines. Most nights, it was just me and one other worker, Kayla. We sorted the defective returns into zones for disposal, scanning everything into the system before loading the pallets onto a truck for destruction. On the night it happened, it was snowing heavily outside. Only a skeleton crew was working. The heater had gone out in our section, and the air inside felt almost as cold as the parking lot. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above us, flickering every few seconds. Around midnight, Kayla went for her break, leaving me alone with 3 pallets of unsorted boxes. I was tired but focused, moving items one by one, scanning, tagging, discarding. That's when I noticed a pallet that wasn't on the manifest. It sat halfway down the aisle, wrapped in shrink plastic that looked older and slightly yellowed. The tape around it had been cut once and rewrapped, unevenly. The tag on the front read defective returns, do not process, printed in faded ink. It didn't match any batch I'd logged that night. I checked my tablet for the ID number, but the system returned an error, item not found in records. The shrink wrap crackled softly when I touched it. Inside were 6 large boxes, all unmarked. Usually, every return box carried a barcode. These didn't. Someone had stacked them neatly, each labeled only with a handwritten word, return, damaged, expired, and one that said simply, not yet. I didn't like that. Not yet. I radioed Kayla to ask if she'd moved a pallet earlier. No answer. I assumed she was still in the break room. I decided to move it to the holding area for verification in the morning. As I started to pull the pallet jack beneath it, the scanner on my wrist beeped on its own. The screen lit up with a line of text, do not move this load. That shouldn't have been possible. The scanner couldn't display system text unless something was scanned. I turned it off, but it powered on again automatically. Same message. My chest tightened. I took a few steps back, my breath visible in the cold air. Then I heard the first sound. A low creak, like wood bending under weight. The pallet shifted slightly, though I hadn't touched it. One of the boxes near the top leaned forward and fell, hitting the floor with a hollow thud. The lid popped open. Inside were several small items, a broken coffee maker, a torn winter coat, a cracked phone charger. All tagged for return. Normal things. But beneath them was something else, a stack of printed forms, soaked around the edges, with a faint brown stain that looked like water, or something thicker. I picked one up. It was a return authorization form dated December 14, 2018. The customer name field read, Employee Record, J. Price. I froze. That name wasn't a customer. It was a worker, a man who used to run our section before me. He'd gone missing during a night shift 4 years earlier, after clocking in and never clocking out. They said he quit and never came back. HR removed him from the system a week later. I looked down again. The papers all had the same signature, J. Price. The air grew colder. I heard the faint squeak of rubber wheels behind me, like another pallet jack moving. But I was alone. The sound came closer, slow and deliberate, until it stopped just a few feet away. I turned my flashlight toward the sound. The aisle was empty. When I looked back at the mysterious pallet, it was closer to me. It had moved at least 3 feet. The trail of dust on the floor confirmed it. I backed away until I hit a rack of empty bins. The scanner on my wrist beeped again, this time rapidly, like a warning. Then a new line appeared. Not returned yet. The lights above flickered violently, casting long, jerky shadows across the boxes. Something inside the pallet wrap shifted again. The plastic stretched and tore with a sharp snap, revealing the top box. The tape peeled itself loose with a long, slow sound. The lid lifted slightly, then fell open. Inside was a stack of uniforms, neatly folded. Old Amazon vests, dusty and gray with age. The top one still had a name tag attached to it. J. Price, Returns Department. The smell hit me a second later, like rust and cold concrete soaked with rain. I dropped the flashlight, and it rolled beneath the shelves. In the faint glow from the emergency lights, I saw movement inside the box. The uniforms were shifting, like something underneath them was moving upward. Then a hand, pale, stiff, gray, pressed against the cardboard wall and slid back down. I turned and ran. By the time I reached the main floor, the lights had stabilized again. My supervisor was walking toward me, asking what had happened. I told him there was an unlogged pallet in the defective zone. He frowned and followed me back down the aisle. But when we got there, the pallet was gone. The floor was clean, no dust trail, no box, no broken coffee maker, nothing. The only thing left was the smell of wet cardboard. The scanner on my wrist had powered off completely, its screen cracked. The supervisor logged it as a misplaced shipment and told me to go home early. The next night, when I arrived, there was a new pallet waiting in the center of the aisle. Same position as before. Wrapped in new plastic. I checked the tag, it had today's date. But in small handwriting beneath the printed label, someone had written, "Return to sender, Price." I refused to touch it. When I reported it to management the next morning, they said no such shipment existed. They checked the cameras, but every frame from the previous night between midnight and 3 a.m. was corrupted. Just static. Kayla told me she never got my radio call, that her device had shut off around the same time. I quit a week later. I didn't want to go near that section again. But 2 days after my last shift, a delivery truck pulled up outside my apartment. No driver in sight, just a plain brown pallet sitting at the curb, wrapped tightly in plastic. On the side was a printed tag with my name, and beneath it, in faint handwriting, "Not returned yet." The end. Echo in aisle 12. It happened at the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Kansas City, Missouri, in August 2022. I was working night maintenance on the packing floor, fixing scanners, conveyor belts, and shelf wiring between the late shift and morning crew. The place was a maze of steel racks and echoing corridors that stretched farther than you could see. At night, when the belt shut down and the last forklift rolled out, the silence was almost physical. You could hear your own breathing bounce off the walls. That night, my job was simple: check the motion sensors in aisle 12. They'd been malfunctioning for a week, triggering alarms when no one was there. The maintenance system kept logging phantom movement between 2 and 3 a.m. Every time security checked, the camera showed nothing but flickering light. I went alone. It was a little after 1:45 when I entered the aisle. The air was unusually cold, and the sound of my boots echoed twice, as if someone else was walking just behind me. The rows of shelves on both sides looked endless, loaded with sealed boxes waiting for morning shipment. I turned on my portable lamp and scanned the upper racks. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. They were soft, uneven, coming from further down the aisle. I stopped walking. The sound stopped, too. I waited for a few seconds, thinking it might have been an echo. Then it started again, slower this time, matching my breathing. "Hello?" I called out. My voice traveled down the metal corridor and came back distorted. like someone whispering my words a second later. "Hello." I moved forward cautiously. Halfway down the aisle, one of the motion lights above me flickered on by itself. Another followed, farther ahead. Each light clicked alive one after another, as if something invisible was moving forward, triggering them in sequence. When I reached the end, everything went dark at once. Every light, every sensor, every sound, gone. For a full minute, there was nothing but my own pulse hammering in my ears. Then, somewhere in the blackness, I heard metal scraping. Something heavy being dragged across the floor. I turned my lamp back on and swept it around. The aisle was empty. The shelves were perfectly still. But then I saw it. A shape stood about 20 feet away. Human-sized. Not solid, more like a darker patch in the dark. It shifted, swaying slightly, then took a step toward me. The sound of boots on concrete echoed again, perfectly matching my earlier steps. "Who's there?" I said, louder this time. No answer. The figure didn't stop. It kept moving, slow, deliberate, until the light from my lamp caught the edge of a reflective vest. It looked just like the ones we wore, except it was the old style, from before the redesign 2 years ago. The person's head was down, face hidden under the shadow of a cap. I said, "Who's there?" The figure stopped. For a moment, it seemed to tilt its head slightly, like listening. Then it turned and walked through the metal racks, not around them, through them. I heard the faint sound of boxes shifting, but nothing fell. My hands were shaking. I forced myself to move forward, shining the lamp where it disappeared. There was no one. Just boxes labeled with outbound codes. I checked the floor, no footprints in the dust layer. Then I noticed something on the scanner mounted to the rack. The small screen was glowing faintly. It wasn't connected to power. The message on it read, "User active, A. Grant." My breath caught. Andrew Grant had been a maintenance worker before me. He'd died in an accident on this floor the previous summer, crushed when a pallet collapsed in aisle 12. His name had been removed from the system months ago. I stepped back, my lamp trembling in my hand. Behind me, the sound of footsteps started again, but this time, they were mine. The rhythm was exact, repeating every movement I made. When I stopped, they stopped. When I breathed, there was another breath behind mine. I turned slowly. Nothing. Just the endless aisle stretching in both directions. Then, faintly, from somewhere ahead, came a whisper. "Don't turn off the light." I froze. The voice was calm, tired, familiar. It was Andrew's. I'd heard recordings of his safety briefings during training. The tone, the phrasing, it was him. The air grew colder. I could see my breath fogging in the beam of my lamp. Something metallic rolled down from the shelf, a small wrench. It clinked twice and landed at my feet. I bent to pick it up, and the moment I touched it, every light in the aisle turned on again at once, flooding everything in white. There was no one there. No movement, no shadow. The silence that followed was deafening. I left the area and went straight to the control room. The security operator, Dennis, looked confused when I told him what happened. He rewound the footage for aisle 12. On the screen, the entire aisle was visible, perfectly still. No figure. No light flickers. The only movement was me. Except, about 15 seconds in, my reflection on the polished floor split. For one frame, there were two shadows moving in opposite directions. Dennis paused the video, zoomed in. One of the shadows was clearly mine. The other was taller, wearing a vest with a reflective stripe across the chest. He tried to play the footage again, but it froze. Then the screen went black, and the feed cut off completely. We rebooted the system, but when it came back, camera 12 had been renamed automatically in the system, echo_user_01, active. The next morning, I filed a maintenance report about the sensors. When I logged in, the report had already been closed. Status, completed by Grant. I showed it to my supervisor. He stared at it for a long time, then quietly said, "Just leave it. Don't go back down that aisle for a while." I didn't. But sometimes, when I walk past that section on my way out, I still hear footsteps echoing mine, always one step behind. The end. The temperature drop. It happened at the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Denver, Colorado, in January 2023. I was part of the packaging team for the night shift, working from 9 p.m. until dawn. Winters there were brutal, but inside the warehouse, it was always warm from the machinery and constant movement. That night, though, the temperature started dropping for no reason anyone could explain. At first, it was just a faint chill around midnight. People joked that the HVAC system had finally given up. But by 2 a.m., you could see your breath fogging in the air. I remember rubbing my hands together, glancing at the temperature gauge near the packing line. It read 42 degrees Fahrenheit, impossible. The system should have kept it around 70. I was working alongside my friend Luis, scanning outgoing boxes. He nudged me and said, "You feel that? Like cold air coming from Zone E?" We both turned toward the far side of the floor, where the lights flickered slightly above the conveyor that led to the storage tunnel. The air there shimmered faintly, like heat distortion, but it was the opposite. You could almost see the cold moving. We called maintenance, but no one came. The warehouse was short-staffed that week, and everyone blamed the thermostat. Then the lights in Zone E cut out entirely. The darkness spread slowly, swallowing one row of lights after another until only the red scanner beams were glowing in the distance. Luis sighed and grabbed his flashlight. "Let's check it. Probably another fuse." I didn't want to go, but I followed him. The deeper we went into Zone E, the colder it got. The concrete floor had a thin layer of frost that cracked under our boots. We passed a stack of sealed boxes and noticed frost forming on the cardboard too. When we reached the end of the conveyor, the temperature sensor on the wall was blinking. It read -5 degrees Fahrenheit. Luis laughed nervously. "No way that's real." He reached out to touch the metal housing, and the moment his fingers brushed it, he flinched back. His glove had stuck for a second, frozen to the surface. Then the conveyor suddenly started running on its own. No power-up tone, no warning. The belts rolled, carrying one lone package out of the dark tunnel toward us. It stopped right in front of where we stood. The label printer beside it flickered to life and printed a tag. The paper slid out, and the words appeared slowly as if typed by hand instead of a machine. "Too cold to leave." Luis looked at me, confused. "That's not a system message." Before I could respond, we both heard it, the sound of movement coming from inside the tunnel. Something metallic scraped against the conveyor frame. We leaned forward slightly, and a gust of icy air hit us so hard it felt like stepping into a freezer. The darkness inside the tunnel seemed thicker than shadows, like black smoke frozen in place. Then something moved within it. It wasn't clear, just a shape, vaguely human, crawling on the conveyor toward us. The scanner beam passed across it, revealing a flash of reflective material, an orange safety vest, the kind we all wore. "Hey!" Luis shouted. "You okay in there?" No response. The figure crawled closer, the temperature dropping even more. My breath came out in clouds, and the air felt sharp in my throat. When the shape was about 10 feet away, it stopped and lifted its head. The eyes reflected the red scanner light, two glowing dots staring straight at us. Luis took a step forward. "Hold on, I'll help." The lights flicked on for half a second, illuminating the tunnel. There was nothing there. No person, no movement, just an empty metal conveyor stretching into darkness. When the lights flickered off again, the package was gone too. Luis cursed under his breath and turned to leave. That's when I noticed his breath forming thick fog, heavier than mine. He looked pale, his lips turning slightly blue. "Man, I don't feel good," he said quietly. His scanner beeped suddenly, displaying an alert I'd never seen before: temperature critical, exit denied. We backed away fast, heading toward the warmer sections, but every few steps, the lights above us shut off again, following us like a wave of darkness. The sound of the conveyor kept running behind us, even though the control switch was still off. By the time we reached the break area, Luis was shaking uncontrollably. The night manager, Sharon, saw him and called medical. When they took his temperature, it was 82 degrees Fahrenheit, severe hypothermia. Inside a warehouse that was supposed to be heated. They rushed him to the hospital. I stayed behind to help Sharon check the system logs. There were no entries for Zone E after 1:58 a.m., as if the entire section had been offline. The thermostat history, however, showed something that made my stomach twist. The reading hadn't risen back to normal. It was still showing -5 degrees Fahrenheit at 3:14 a.m., the exact time Luis collapsed. The next day, HR sent an internal memo saying Zone E would be temporarily closed for equipment evaluation. They told us not to talk about it. When Luis came back a week later, he didn't remember what happened after entering the tunnel. He said he woke up outside the building with frost on his jacket, his scanner on the ground next to him. He gave it to me before turning it in. It keeps buzzing randomly, he said. That night, I turned the scanner on out of curiosity. The display glitched for a few seconds before showing a single message. Too cold to leave. I dropped it immediately. The screen went black, and it never powered up again. 2 days later, when I checked the temperature log one last time before transferring to another section, Zone E had been removed entirely from the system. In its place was a new label. Zone Freeze, Inactive. And sometimes, during the last hour of the shift, when the building goes quiet, you can still feel that faint gust of freezing air moving across the packing line. The end. The Phantom Shipment. It happened at the Amazon warehouse in Louisville, Kentucky, in April 2023. I worked as a logistics coordinator on the late-night inventory shift, mostly tracking packages between zones before they went out to delivery. It was monotonous work, just screens, scanners, and endless rows of boxes. But on that night, something came through the system that shouldn't have existed. At around 1:10 a.m., I got a system alert on my terminal. It was a shipment notification labeled Return TO Sender, Priority. Nothing unusual, except the tracking number didn't match any of our current manifests. When I clicked it, the shipment details expanded, and that's when I froze. The sender and receiver fields were blank. The only text was under origin location, Zone 19, inactive. That wasn't possible. Zone 19 had been sealed for over a year after a conveyor collapse injured 2 workers and destroyed part of the structure. No one was assigned there, and the cameras had been turned off. But according to the system, a shipment from that section was already in transit. I checked the floor map. A blue marker blinked faintly in Zone 19, indicating movement, someone, or something, pushing a cart. I called the floor lead, Maya, and asked if anyone had gone back there for maintenance. She said no one had clearance for that area after hours. We both stared at the monitor as the blue dot kept moving, making its way toward the sorting line. Could be a glitch, she muttered. Then why's the conveyor moving? I said. On the feed, the belt in Zone 19 started running, even though it wasn't powered. The sensors pinged, detecting a single box traveling down the line. Then it crossed into Zone 18, our active floor. The cameras there showed it clearly, a medium-sized brown package, sealed perfectly with old-style Amazon tape that hadn't been used in years. Maya went down to check it in person. I watched her on the camera as she reached the belt. She hesitated, then picked up the box. The label was smeared, but I could still make out faint words in marker, Return TO Sender. Should I open it? She asked through the radio. Wait, I said, checking the system again. The shipment ID had updated automatically. New line appeared, processed, authorized by J. Rivera. My stomach dropped. That was my name. But I hadn't touched anything. Maya, I said, my voice shaking. Put the box down. Before she could respond, the radio filled with static, sharp and loud. Then, through the static, a voice, slow, low, almost mechanical. Return all items. Maya jumped back, dropping the box. It hit the floor, the tape splitting slightly. The lights above her flickered, then one of the fixtures popped, showering sparks. The radio went silent. I left the control room and ran down there. The temperature in that section had dropped, and the air felt heavy, thick with the smell of dust and cold metal. The box sat where she dropped it. Maya stood a few feet away, pale, shaking her head. I heard someone inside, she whispered. Like breathing. I crouched next to the box. It didn't move. I peeled the tape slowly and opened one flap. Inside were items wrapped in plastic, an old badge, a torn vest, a pair of gloves, a cracked phone screen. I pulled out the badge first. It belonged to Mark Holloway, the floor manager who'd gone missing during the Zone 19 collapse. They said he was trapped when the structure caved in, but rescue teams never found a body. After a week, they called it an accident. Maya, I said quietly. We're leaving this here. We went back to the control room and tried to delete the shipment file from the system. It wouldn't let us. Every time I hit remove, it reappeared. Finally, the entire screen went black, and a new message appeared in white letters. Return confirmed. Maya backed away from the monitor, whispering that she was done for the night. She left without clocking out. I stayed, trying to reboot the console, but the system had locked me out. I decided to do a manual shutdown of the conveyor power to stop any more phantom shipments. When I reached the main switchboard, every conveyor except one was off. The one still running was in Zone 19. I stared at the panel. The breaker for that section had been physically removed months ago. I could see the empty slot where it should have been. Yet the light above it glowed green. I turned off the master supply for the entire floor. The moment I did, every light in the building went out. For a full 10 seconds, the warehouse was pitch black. Then, slowly, one sound began echoing through the dark, boxes sliding along a conveyor. I turned my flashlight toward the noise. The same brown package rolled out of the shadows and stopped at my feet. The words on top were now darker, freshly written, returned. When the lights came back on, the control screens rebooted automatically. The shipment log was empty again. Every record of the box was gone. But under operator activity, a new entry had appeared. User, M. Holloway, completed. I left early that morning. I didn't even clock out. When I came back 2 nights later, the entire Zone 19 area had been fenced off. The manager told us the structure had shifted again and was permanently sealed. Before I left my shift, curiosity got the better of me. I checked the archive drive that stored deleted shipments. There was one file still inside, a corrupted data string with no name. I opened it. The screen flashed once, showing a still image of the Zone 19 camera. There was a figure standing on the inactive conveyor, wearing a torn safety vest, holding a small brown package. The timestamp in the corner wasn't from that night, it was dated April 2023, 1:10 a.m. The exact moment the phantom shipment first appeared. As the image froze, a single line of text appeared at the bottom of the frame. All returns processed. Sender located. I unplugged the drive and threw it away before leaving. But when I got home that morning, there was a cardboard box waiting by my front door. Plain brown. No label. No tape. Just one word written across the top in black marker. Returned. The end. The light that never turns off. It happened at the Amazon warehouse in Sacramento, California, in May 2023. I was on the electrical maintenance team for the overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., responsible for lighting inspections and emergency systems. It was quiet work most nights, just the hum of machines and the steady buzz of fluorescent fixtures. But there was one light that never went out. We first noticed it a month earlier in the upper storage section, Zone F. Every light in that area was on a timer controlled by the central panel, except for one industrial bulb above rack 47B. No matter what we did, manual switch, circuit cut, even full power shutdown, it stayed on. Always the same pale white glow, steady and silent. Management said to leave it. But it bothered everyone. The night crew started calling it the watchlight. People said they'd catch glimpses of movement beneath it when they walked past the aisle, shadows that didn't match their steps, boxes slightly rearranged. I didn't believe in that kind of thing. Until the night I had to check it myself. It was a Thursday, around 2:30 a.m. The rest of the team was working near the main generator, and I was assigned to isolate the circuit for Zone F. The plan was simple: climb the maintenance ladder, remove the old ballast, and replace the unit entirely. If it still stayed on, we'd remove the fixture altogether. When I reached rack 47B, the air felt warmer, heavy. The rest of the warehouse was cool, but under that light it felt like standing near a furnace. I looked up, there it was, humming faintly, the light flickering for a moment as if reacting to me. I shut off my portable lamp and climbed higher, my tools clinking softly against the steel. Halfway up, I noticed something strange. The reflection of the light on the metal rack didn't match its rhythm. It flickered out of sync, as though the reflection itself was coming from another bulb. I paused and turned around. Behind me, everything was dark. Only that single circle of light illuminated the aisle floor below. I reached the top and unscrewed the fixture casing. It should have been hot, but it was cold to the touch. Inside, the wiring was charred black, completely burned through. There was no possible way it could still be powered. I leaned closer, shining my handheld light to see better. That's when I saw movement below. Someone was standing at the end of the aisle. I couldn't see the face, just a tall silhouette looking up at me. The light behind me made it impossible to tell who it was. I called out, "Hey! This area's restricted." The figure didn't move. Just stood there. Watching. Then the warehouse lights flickered once, twice, and went out entirely. All except the one above me. The only light left. I tried my radio, dead. I looked down again, and the figure was gone. That's when I felt it, the temperature drop. A cold wind brushed against my back, but there was no draft that high up. I turned quickly, and for a split second, there was someone right behind me. A face, pale, eyes wide open, mouth half parted as if whispering. Then gone. My hand slipped, and I almost fell off the ladder. When I regained balance, I climbed down as fast as I could. The moment my boots hit the floor, the radio crackled to life. "Control to maintenance, Zone F lights offline. Can you confirm?" I looked up. The light was still on. Bright as ever. "Negative," I said. "One's still active. Rack 47B. There was a pause on the other end. Then, "That's not possible. Power's been cut for that zone." I didn't respond. I just stared at the glow, at the quiet dust swirling beneath it. Then the light flickered again, and for a brief instant, I saw the silhouette standing directly beneath it, same height, same shape, unmoving. I blinked, and it was gone. When I got back to the control room, I checked the security feed for Zone F. The live camera showed the aisle perfectly empty. But when I rewound the footage, something didn't line up. At 2:28 a.m., before I even got there, the feed showed me already standing under the light. Same clothes, same posture. The real me didn't arrive until 2:31. We replayed it again. Two of me. The one in the footage looked up, smiled faintly, and then vanished as soon as the light flickered. The supervisor ordered the camera reset. We filed a report, marked it as an electrical anomaly, and shut down the zone for the rest of the shift. But the next night, the light was still glowing when we came in. A week later, an electrician named Harper went up to remove it completely. He climbed the same ladder, checked the same wires, and laughed at us for being superstitious. The moment he touched the casing, the light went out. For the first time in months, it was dark. We all exhaled. Then Harper didn't come down. We called his name. No answer. We climbed up after him, and found the ladder empty. His tools were still clipped to the side, his radio buzzing quietly on the floor. But there was no sign of him anywhere. We checked the security feed again. The moment the light went out, Harper vanished from the frame. Just disappeared mid-step. The camera froze for 5 seconds, then came back showing the bulb glowing faintly again. It's been months since then. Zone F is sealed now, for renovations. But when the night shift gets quiet, and you walk past the service door, you can still see it, the faint, steady glow of that single light shining through the crack beneath the door. And if you stand there long enough, you'll see a shadow move beneath it. Just for a second. Like someone still standing watch, waiting for the power to go out again. The end. The last package. It happened at the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Phoenix, Arizona, in late September 2023. I'd been with the company for almost 4 years, working night shifts in the shipping division. By then, I knew every sound of the building, the clank of conveyor belts, the beeping scanners, even the rhythm of the forklifts reversing. But that night, something felt different the moment I walked in. There was an eerie stillness over the floor, like the entire warehouse was holding its breath. The air was dry and heavy. Only a handful of workers were scheduled for the shift, and most of them had called out because of a storm that knocked out power across half the city earlier that evening. But somehow, our section was still lit, powered by the backup generators. It was just me, my supervisor Alan, and 2 others, Maria and Deshawn. The 4 of us were supposed to clear the last shipments before shutdown for maintenance. Around 2 a.m., Alan came over with a clipboard. "All right, Rivera," he said, tapping the page with his pen. "You're on final packaging duty. One last order came through, then we're done for the night." I nodded, exhausted. My hands were numb from hours of taping and labeling boxes. The thunder outside rattled the glass skylights as the rain poured down, echoing across the roof. When I checked the manifest, I frowned. The final order didn't have a product ID, just a note in the remarks column, "Manual handling required." The destination field wasn't a customer's address. It was blank, except for 2 words typed in bold, "Home delivery." I radioed Alan. "Hey, this one's missing info. You sure it's real?" He checked his own copy and shrugged. "System glitch, probably. Just pack it. It's flagged priority." I went over to the designated station, but there was no box waiting. Instead, there was an empty conveyor tray with a single folded piece of paper resting inside. I picked it up. The print was faint, like it had been copied several times. Item requested, personal delivery. Handler, J. Rivera. Destination, 1425, North Creek Avenue. I froze. That was my home address. I looked around, expecting one of them to be laughing, maybe recording me for a prank, but the warehouse was silent except for the hum of machinery. The others were far down the line, out of sight. I called Alan again. "Who entered this order?" "Hold on." Static filled the radio for a moment, then his voice returned, quieter this time. "That can't be right. There's no entry with your name in the log." But as he spoke, the belt in front of me started moving. The scanner lights came on, even though the system was offline for nightly maintenance. A cardboard box slid toward me, plain brown, unmarked, sealed with thick gray tape. It stopped right at my station. "Alan," I said slowly, "the box just showed up." He didn't answer. I lifted it. It was heavier than it looked. I turned it over, no label, no barcode, no shipping number. Just one word written on the side in black marker, "Delivered." The storm outside grew louder, shaking the walls. The emergency lights flickered. My scanner beeped on its own. The screen glowed white for a second before displaying text I'd never seen before. "Assignment active, confirmed delivery." I stepped back, trying to radio again, but the connection was gone. Then the power cut completely. Everything went dark, except for the emergency exit lights glowing faint red. The only sound left was the rain hammering on the roof. I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the far end of the packing zone. "Alan?" I called out. No reply. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped just beyond the shadows. I could make out the outline of someone tall, standing motionless. The faint red glow lit the reflective strip of a safety vest. Who's there? The figure didn't move. I shined my phone's flashlight toward it. The light flickered once, then died completely. The backup batteries had drained. The silence broke when the conveyor belt started up again, by itself. The rollers squeaked and rattled, even though there was no power. The box on my table slid forward, inching toward the edge, then dropped to the floor with a dull thud. I crouched to pick it up, and that's when I heard a whisper right next to my ear. Finish your shift. I spun around, but no one was there. The air was freezing now. My breath came out in visible clouds. I looked down, and the box was open. I hadn't touched the tape, but it was peeled perfectly along the seam. Inside was my name tag, my work gloves, and a folded sheet of paper identical to the first one. This one said, "Delivered successfully. Return home." I backed away slowly, clutching the radio. It crackled to life suddenly, filled with static. Then, beneath the static, I heard Alan's voice, but faint, wrong somehow. "Rivera, where are you?" "I'm at my station," I said. "What's going on?" Long pause. Then, "You need to leave. Now." I grabbed my bag and ran. The red lights above the exit flickered faster as I got closer. When I reached the double doors, they opened automatically, even though the electronic lock shouldn't have worked without power. Outside, the rain had stopped. The parking lot was empty except for one delivery truck idling near the loading dock, headlights on. I thought it was one of ours, maybe the driver coming back for the last load. I ran toward it, waving. The closer I got, the more wrong it looked. The truck had no logos, no plates, just a blank white surface that gleamed under the security lights. The back doors were slightly open. I hesitated, then climbed the ramp to check inside. The cargo bay was filled with rows of boxes, stacked floor to ceiling, each labeled the same way, home delivery. My hands started to shake. I turned to leave, and noticed a clipboard hanging beside the door. It had a manifest list, each line filled with names. I scanned down the page until I reached the last entry. Handler, J. Rivera. Status, in transit. The door slammed shut behind me. The engine revved. I banged on the metal, shouting, but my voice was drowned by the sound of the gears shifting. The truck began moving. I stumbled backward, my flashlight finally flickering back to life for a split second. The beam swept across the walls of the cargo bay, and I saw something that froze me completely. Each box had a printed photo taped to its front. Faces of warehouse workers, people I recognized. Some who'd quit, some who'd been fired, a few who had just stopped showing up. Every single one labeled delivered. The engine cut suddenly. Everything went silent. Then, in the darkness, the rear door clicked open by itself. I stepped out. I was back in the warehouse. The lights were on again, the conveyors running like normal. It was morning. Workers moved past me as if nothing had happened. Alan was standing near the control station, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. "Where were you?" he asked. "You vanished from the cameras at 2:07. We thought you'd gone home." I looked at my watch, it was 7:45. When I told him what happened, he just shook his head. "You're overtired, man. There was no truck. There was no final shipment." I checked the logbook again. The last recorded order ended at 1:55 a.m. My name wasn't anywhere on the system. But when I opened my locker to grab my keys, a small brown package was sitting inside. It was sealed. My name was handwritten across the top. I didn't touch it. I quit the next day. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Maria. She said Alan had gone missing during his night shift. Security found his scanner still logged in. On its screen was a single line of text. "Assignment complete, returned home." That same afternoon, a box arrived on my doorstep. Plain brown. No labels, no markings, just one word written across the top in perfect black ink. Delivered. The end.